He was certainly eccentric. The one thing he used to do is he had a handkerchief that he used to keep in his hand all the time, and he would come in and wipe your makeup, you know, with the same one.
Then he'd stick it in his mouth.
I was wondering if he blew his nose, too.
Oh, stop.
I got a casting list after I finished the script. We're casting for who's going to play Zeb Macahan, the lead. And I got a cast list from the casting department at MGM, and it had all these names on it, like Kirk Douglas and all these other names. And there's one name there. I said, oh, so I called the casting department. I said, this guy is not only wrong, he's dead. It's Audie Murphy.
And I'm looking for something for Larry Mahan. And all of a sudden, a young actor in a small scene comes in, and the camera has a love affair with him. This is my Luke, this is our Luke, and I call Jim Byrnes, and I call John Manley, and I call Harris Kettleman, and then Bernie McAvity. Already, you gotta come down, I found Luke.
What was the wonderful thing about How the West Was Won is that the actors that guest starred on our series were many of them Western stars, had been in many classic Westerns, and I feel that Kitty and I got to experience working with people that were in, shall I say, the twilight of their careers, from Slim Pickens, we had everybody, Don Red Berry, we had so many.
It was a joy for me to be on that show. It changed my life completely. I met Bruce, and even though we played brother and sister, we didn't behave like it off camera.
Jim Arness, he knew Blazing Saddles. There was nothing funny in How the West Was Won, but he just had an inkling that I could do what they were wanting me to do. And so he was the one that called me and asked me to do the thing. Then he called Boxleitner and had Boxleitner call me.
So I got to be kind of a villain and kind of sidled up to Bruce, and we had sort of a flirtatious thing in the episode, and I just loved it. I liked the dialogue. I liked the way it was directed, the way it looked. I just saw it last night because I thought, I better look at this. I haven't seen it since it was out, and it still holds up. It was really cute.
So they got all ready, got the lights set up, they rehearsed everything, got ready to shoot the shot. Bert calls, action. Jack and Jim slowly ride into the canyon. Indians! The Indians come charging down off the hill, hooping and hollering and screaming and just raising hell, a fierce-looking bunch of guys. By the time they got down to where Jim and Jack were, there's about 3 of them still on horseback.
Here to talk about one of the all-time great television series, How the West Was Won. And it was produced by MGM because they had done the classic feature film done in Cinerama.
Already acclaimed and applauded the world over, in How the West Was Won, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Cinerama have brought together the biggest and most distinguished all-star cast in entertainment history.
John Wayne, Henry Fonda, Jimmy Stewart, Carol Baker, Debbie Reynolds, Robert Preston, Lee Van Cleef, who wasn't even billed in that film, Walter Brennan, everybody was in there. Walter Brennan played a really good bad guy, a river pirate, and a terrific score by Alfred Newman. One of the funders, financing guys in the Cinerama process, was a man who had been an early silent movie documentarian, Miriam C. Cooper. Now, that name may not be familiar to a lot of you, but the film that he wrote and produced, called King Kong, certainly is. And he later formed a partnership with John Ford and made some John Wayne films, including the classic The Searchers. That was Miriam C. Cooper. I know you worked with John Wayne in How the West Was Won.
Yeah.
Which, the one segment that John Ford directed. How amazing is that? What was Ford like?
He was a character is what he was like. He was a real character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, had a patch on his eye. He was great. I mean, I really liked him, but he was certainly eccentric. The one thing he used to do is he had a handkerchief that he used to keep in his hand all the time, and he would come in and wipe your makeup, you know, with the same The
Then
same
he'd
one. I
stick
don't
it
know.
in his mouth.
I was wondering if he blew his nose.
Oh,
too.
stop. He may have.
But I knew that I was working with a legend. You know, he was.
Well, he mistreated so many people, but they all came back to work with him again because their performances were so good.
Yeah.
Did he give you much guidance?
I don't remember too much guidance. I didn't have a lot to do in that movie.
You're just hiding behind that rock. And
With George Papard,
lights.
we had a little scene.
He stops you from killing John Wayne, right?
Yeah.
And the South, Russ Tamblyn. And the famous of history, John Wayne as General William Tecumseh Sherman. Henry Morgan as General Ulysses S. Grant.
It's like
I didn't work in the scene with him. I mean, I was sort of away from it, but he was working with John Wayne, and he used to just cuss him up and down all day long for a really long time. He would say, "Come on, Duke. Come on, Duke. When are you gonna start acting?"
Well, I guess he did that all the time, and Duke took it.
Yeah, I was surprised because I thought I was the only one that saw that. But then I read later too that he was the only one that could talk to John Wayne that way.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to talk to Duke like that.
No.
And it came about in an unusual way because Al Ruddy and Jim Byrnes got together. Oh, wait a minute. Jim Byrnes is here. Jim, could you come up and explain to us how that happened? Yes, please come up here. And before he starts talking about the great How the West Was Won, I must say that he was mentored by John Mantley, who was the producer of Gunsmoke, and Jim was a story editor on there, wrote some of the greatest scripts. In fact, the first script he wrote was called Lobo with Morgan Woodward. So that's enough. I've talked enough about this. Let's have Jim tell us how it happened.
No, keep going. Anyway, how this all happened, How the West Was Won, I worked on Gunsmoke. And the story I wrote for the show for 7 seasons. And Al Ruddy, who I knew, who 3-4 years prior to that, produced The Godfather. So MGM calls Ruddy one day and said, "We want to make a TV series based on the feature film, How the West Was Won, and we want you to produce it." So Al calls me on the phone and says, "Let's have lunch at Nate and Al's in Beverly Hills." So I know what the hell it's about. So I go there, and he says, "I'm going to produce How the West Was Won. I'd like you to write the pilot." I said, "Oh, geez, okay. You know." And I got approved by MGM, blah, blah, blah. And so anyway, I had to write a Bible for the whole series. I saw they ran the movie for me and my wife, and they ran the movie for it, and I saw the film, and I said, "I'm going to go a different direction. I didn't want to see Debbie Reynolds dancing around the campfire." So I decided to go a whole different direction. So I conceived Zeb Macahan. By the way, the Macahan name came from some of my ancestors from Ireland. They never got to the States, but anyway, I did that anyway. So I just did a whole, like, 100-page Bible. I plotted out the whole stories, the storylines, the characters, the whole thing. I got that in, and then they said, "Go ahead with the script." Now, I thought we were going to do like an hour pilot, a 2.5-hour pilot. And it was the most expensive, the longest, most expensive pilot in TV history. And then, after I finished the script, Al says to me, "How would you like to produce it?" I never produced anything in my life, except a couple of kids. I can brag on that, you know. So I said, "I never produced." He said, "Don't worry about it. We'll cover you." So I was going to produce the show. And then what happened, I got a casting list. After I finished the script, we were casting for who's going to play Zeb Macahan, the lead. Husite. And I got a cast list from the casting department at MGM, and it had all these names on it, like Kirk Douglas and all these other names. And there's one name there. I said, "Oh," so I called the casting department. I said, "This guy is not only wrong, he's dead. It's Audie Murphy." So anyway, Gunsmoke was going to go in their 21st season, and in fact, I even wrote a script for the 21st season. And they got canceled suddenly. And so now Jim Arness was available. And I thought, he's the perfect Zeb Macahan. So we got Jim, and along with Jim came John Mantley, who was my guy on Gunsmoke, my mentor, who gave me my first big break, by the way. And they came on Gunsmoke, on How the West Went, pardon me. And we went from there and we developed it, and we shot the pilot in southern Utah, Arizona, and what's it, Bruce, Lake Sherwood. Yeah. And we shot the pilot, and then finally what happened is that we had to wait a year before we started the series. So we're on hold. So I spent that time, we were developing scripts, that kind of stuff, and we were developing scripts. And then we finally went ahead and did, we got renewed, we got picked up, and we did 6 2-hour movies. And then after that, I left. But that's how it all got started. Uh-huh.
On the series, went to John. Didn't he bring a lot of the same personnel who had worked on Gunsmoke for so many years?
Yeah, Bernie Macavity directed the pilot, and of course he was the old Gunsmoke director. Uh-huh. And then we had Vince Macavity and the whole pile of Gunsmoke. It was a Gunsmoke alumni. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was a gorgeous series, and nothing like it had ever been on the air before because it looked like a feature. What were some of the great locations used in the series?
Well, actually, Tucson became a second home. And then we did, southern Utah, we did Oregon, and, all over the place.
I think Kanab. Didn't you go to Kanab?
Utah. We shot most of the pilot, for the Macahans, but we shot some Gunsmokes before that, too, in Kanab, Utah. So we got to know Kanab very, very well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you, Jim. We happen to have the casting director of the pilot right here with us today. He's a man who started as an actor. He was in the Zorro TV series in an arc that featured Annette Funicello. Steve Stevens.
Thank you very, very much. It's an honor to be here today. Well, what a casting director does is he gets a script. And a casting director isn't as important as a lot of casting directors would lead you to believe. We're our go-between between the actor, the manager, the agent, and the production company. So we get a script, we break down the characters, we meet actors and narrow it down, hopefully 3 or 4. Some directors want to see 20 and 30 for one line. Oklahoma Crew with Stanley Kramer, we cast in 2 days. So I narrowed it down to 4 or 5 people for each role. And while I'm doing that, I get a call to come to a man named John Mantley, who I don't know, in his office. I met this man, and he informed me that Jim Byrnes was no longer the main honcho on this thing. Mantley was. And Jim was basically a writer who wrote this. And I could tell that he wanted Pam Polifrone, who was the casting director on Gunsmoke, and a good casting director. She had, she knew what they wanted. And then when I was a child actor, she had cast me. I liked Pam. But he was stuck with me. And so I felt that there was this attitude and problem that I was going to have. So I went back to my office. I narrowed things down. I wanted to find a role for my dearest friend and my son's mentor, Larry Mahan, 6 times world champion cowboy and a big, big, big star at that time. So I ordered a film that he starred in with Lindsay Bloom, his wife, called Six Pack Annie. And I'm looking for something for Larry Mahan. And all of a sudden, a young actor in a small scene comes in, and the camera has a love affair with him. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. I go, oh man, this is Luke. This is my Luke. This is our Luke. And I call Jim Byrnes, and I call John Mantley, and I call Harris Kettleman, and then Bernie Macavity. Already, you got to come down. I found Luke. So they take a look, and they say, oh, okay. Yeah, test him. No big deal. Go ahead, test him. So I go ahead and I set up a test for Bruce. But ABC wanted an actor named Richard Hatch, who took over Michael Douglas's role on Streets of San Francisco. Fine actor, not right for this role. They found out that I was going to test Bruce. Jim knows this is the truth when it came down that if I tested Bruce, I would no longer be in show business. It's that old joke, you'll never work in show business again. Nobody knew I bought a motel in Durango, Colorado, and I didn't give a shit. Okay? So I was going to be fun. So now I call Bruce's agent named John Crosby, who was one of the good guys and had known John for a long time. I said, John, you have to trust me on this. Let me work out the deal. You stay out of it, because if you press me, I'm going to have to make the lowest possible deal possible, because he doesn't have a whole lot of credits. I did not know that he was from the Goodman Theater in New York. That's as good as like hanging out with Lee Strasberg. I didn't know he starred on Broadway in something called Quo Vadis something or other. This was a guy, not just a guy that we're going to put on a horse. This was an actor. So a couple of days later, we're in the screening room, and we watch all the tests. And now I run the 3 actors, and then I run Richard Hatch's, and then I run Bruce. And then we turned the lights on, and everybody agreed. Bruce was the one to play Luke, including Arness. I mean, that was it. That was exciting, but there also was one of the casting people from ABC was in the back of the room. And by the time I get back to my office, I get a call, pick up the option of Richard Hatch. And I said, well, everybody liked Bruce Boxleitner. She said, pick up the option on Richard Hatch. I run down the hall to John Mantley's office. They want Richard Hatch. What are we going to do? Go to Al Ruddy, Academy Award winner. They want Richard Hatch, not Bruce. What are we going to do? Bernie McAvity. What are we going to do? Jim Byrnes. Jim was the only one that gave a damn and couldn't care that we're going to have to fight ABC for this because nobody else wanted. But then Jim's power was taken away. Patted me on the back. He said, do what you got to do. I get back to the office, and I've got a job to do. I don't know Bruce from Adam. I just think that he's the best one for the part, and everybody seemed to like him. I'm going to have to live with the actor that's going to play opposite James Arness for years. So I decided I was going to call James Arness. I was warned by John Mantley, never go to James Arness for anything. Never go over my head, because he is the boss. Conversation goes something like this. Hello, Mr. Arness? Yes. Hi, I'm Steve Stevens. Silence. And I had to get down to business, and I said, do you like Bruce Boxleitner? He says, I love him. I said, do you like Richard Hatch? And he said, who? I said, Richard Hatch, and he is the actor that was in Streets of San Francisco, and that's the one that ABC wants, and I can't anybody to fight, and I don't think anybody's talked to you about this. And there's more silence on the phone. And I'm sweating, because I know I'm not supposed to make this phone call. And I said, if you want Bruce, you're going to have to go and step it up. Tell everybody this is the one you want, or you're going to be dealing with Richard Hatch for 5 years. And he said, I want Bruce Boxleitner. I said, fine. I said, but please don't tell John Mantley that I made this phone call, because I am not going to be on the rest of this project. I don't want to stay. About 2 hours later, I get a call from ABC, pick up the option on Bruce Boxleitner.
This is really exciting doing this today. You know, James Arness was like a huge mentor for me. You had your mentor, John Mantley, Jim, but James Arness, and not that he would be so embarrassed to hear me say this, but he truly was. He was a mentor to me. He taught me what it was to be in the day-to-day the star of a television series, the responsibility of the star of the television series, and how to do it with grace, humor, and very, very hard work. He was a tremendous man. And of course, you know, for a kid from the Midwest like me, to be sitting there on this marvelous show, I remember pinching myself, thinking, my God, I'm out there, I'm in this old fort, we're in the canyons, these Red Rock Canyons outside of Kanab, Utah. So many great movies had been shot there, and I was always a movie and television buff, so I knew of the place. But here to be standing with this mountain of a man. Now, I'm a tall man, but I am, thank you. But he was really a tall man, and I think, Kitty, you can attest to this too. He was 6'2", probably in his boots. He was what, 6'6", 6'7", I don't know, something around there. All I know is that during being out in the desert with him, would be standing there, and I literally would stand in his shade to get out of the sun. And I thought, I was a big guy, and I'd look up at him always. But
and he was wearing moccasins.
And he was wearing moccasins. God, my God, as Matt Dillon, he was wearing cowboy boots. My God, for this kid who I'd only done a few things, and yes, Six-Pack Annie, Steve, thank you. I had a nude scene in that with Maeve's wife. I thought I'd shake it up a little bit here. I know.
That's where he learned bareback riding.
Thank you. There was just to be launched, to be given an opportunity to be with these absolute A-list heavyweights. I mean, even Marie Saint, I think she got the Oscar for On the Waterfront. Richard Kiley, who created the role of Man of La Mancha. I mean, these were incredible stars, and to be standing amongst them was just the biggest thrill of my life. By the way, Cliff Emick, who played a wonderful bartender in the pilot of How the West Was Won, first time I ever got to belly up to a bar with James Arness. And what? And a belly. Right. And he's the guy who served us beer. And then we got in a fight, remember?
I want to add to Bruce's credits. 2 years ago, he was inducted into the Cowboy Hall of Fame.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you.
Suddenly you became the new television cowboy. You stuck with it, and you were a good hand. Now, were you already a good writer?
No.
Who taught you?
Well, we had this Wrangler family, the Lundins, Rose and Dick Lundin. I guess had done Gunsmoke for quite a few years. Rose had me come out to their ranch out in Sand Canyon when there wasn't a building out there, and I learned from the Lundins. And it was very bare bones. They taught me how to, before I even mounted the horse, everything from the ground up, grooming, picking the hooves, everything to the saddling, learning how to saddle your own horse. And I'd go out with them. And then eventually they let me just go out there in the hills all by myself. They said if the horse came back, depends on what time of day, we might come look for you. But if the horse came back by itself, yeah, you got a long walk. But eventually I did. I just stuck with it. I learned from the Wranglers. They're the best people on the set. The Wranglers, the stuntmen and women. And more or less, there was no cowboy school to go to. But that was it for me,
Well, the series, How the West Was Won, was actually a series of 2-hour movies. And they had arcs with various stories. And I remember one that seemed like it was Angel and the Bad Man,
which Burt Kennedy directed. And we used to always say to each other, weren't you the director of that Academy Award winning? Because there was a movie with Harrison Ford called Witness, which was literally the same writers who had done the original story, reworked it into a modern setting. First of all, before I do that, may I invite my sister, Laura Macahan, up here?
The sister that you married?
Yes, we did.
Oh, yes.
At the time. Miss Kitty Ogilvy.
It's so lovely to be here today and see all our friends from so many years ago, all still looking so lovely and so happy. And what a joy. It was a joy for me to be on that show. It changed my life completely. I met Bruce, and even though we played brother and sister, we didn't behave like it off camera. Not to tell any tales, but we did have 2 children, and both of them work with Lincoln today. They're grown up now, and it was a joy. It changed my life in every way possibly for the best I could have ever hoped it to be. Anyway, it's lovely to see you all, and I give the mic back to you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kitty.
I remember Kitty and I were waiting to find out if we were going to be picked up. And there was a thing called Filmex at one time over at the Century City. And we sat through, wasn't it a 48-hour Western movie marathon, and didn't want to come out until we heard whether we were picked up or not. And by God, we were picked up to go ahead after that. So But I felt that was a good omen. So we saw every major Western there was. Here was the wonderful thing about How the West Was Won, is that the actors that guest starred on our series were many of them Western stars, had been in many classic Westerns, and I feel that Kitty and I got to experience working with people that were in, shall I say, the twilight of their careers, from Slim Pickens, we had everybody, Don Red Berry, we had so many.
Morgan Woodward.
Morgan Woodward, who I wish was here today. He was supposed to be
Elam.
here. Brian Keith, Lloyd Bridges, who I dearly love. I did a two-parter show with him, and then later went on to work with his son Jeff in the movie
Ricardo
Tron.
Montalban.
Ricardo Montalban won an Emmy for his nose. He played this wonderful Indian chief, as you remember, and he claims he got it because they had this beautiful sort of Roman nose made for him, and he attributes the entire performance to the prosthetic nose he had. What I love about that is that in all my favorite classic movies, so many of these people were young in. And we got to hear stories. I want to just tell you, sitting under a wagon out in the Arizona desert, waiting for the next setup, sitting under the shade of a wagon just to find shade anywhere, with Slim Pickens, telling stories of his first film, his first movies with Errol Flynn, who Errol Flynn knocked him cold. Rocky Mountain, that's right. But working with everybody. And the one guy that he attested that redid his whole career was Stanley Kubrick, when he did a movie called Dr. Strangelove. He played the cowboy commander of a B-52 bombing Russia, and he rode the atom bomb down like he was riding a bull, going, yeah, all the way down to boom. It was great. And he said that remade his entire career, that strangely enough. But he worked with everybody. And to hear these guys tell these stories, which actors tend to do sitting around on a set, it was an education that I don't think we even realized, for the most part, we were getting.
How the West Was Won will continue in a moment.
I think doing How the West Was Won, yes, was for me, it was like a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, those were big budgeted, with great guest stars too. LQ again, I think, did those, and of course, Bruce Boxleitner, Jim Arness.
Bruce, who's out here right now.
We got a cowboy in the house.
Yes, yeah. Okay. It was so much fun working with Bruce. I mean, and it was a good compatibility, and we had a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I liked the dialogue. I liked that my character's name was Flory, and she had her own gang. I mean, come on. LQ is saying, I'm going to go into town, I'm going to rob this bank of like $8 million. Who wants to come with me? And I'd look around and I go, okay, anybody in? No takers or something like this. It was like, oh my gosh, it was perfect. So I got to be kind of a villain and kind of sidled up to Bruce, and we had sort of a flirtatious thing in the episode, and I just loved it. I liked the dialogue. I liked the way it was directed, the way it looked. I just saw it last night because I thought, I better look at this. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it since it was out, and it still holds up. It was really cute.
They are. They look like movies. Great to see Big Jim, too, rugged like a mountain.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. I really enjoyed that show.
In the TV series How the West Was Won, which was James Arness and Bruce Boxleitner and Morgan Woodward and a bunch of other nice, great people who could really make Westerns, I had no idea what they really wanted me to do in the picture, but I did we decided after they had cast me what character I was to play. They really didn't have my character, but Jim Arness, he knew Blazing Saddles. There was nothing funny in How the West Was Won, but he just had an inkling that I could do what they were wanting me to do. And so he was the one that called me and asked me to do the thing. Then he called Boxleitner and had Boxleitner call me. And that was really a kick in the pants to have big people call me and say, hey, why don't you join us in this cast? And it was a great little series. We had a good time. I played a bad guy. And you know, I've played very few bad guys in my life, but he was a funny. It was a comical bad guy. I remember we stole a bunch of money. People caught me stealing money, took my shoes off, made me walk across the desert, and the next thing you see is I've got all kinds of bandages all over my toes, blood everywhere. That's been, it was one of those learning experiences for me, actually. That was way back yonder. And when I worked in my first 4 or 5 years, it was all a learning experience, and that was one of the big ones there, because it was like, I don't know, worked on a thing 3 weeks or so, and it was a fun working, learning experience.
We've talked about the casting, we've talked about the stars, we've talked about the writer-producers, but they had to look good, too. So we've got somebody who helped Burt Kennedy study the Indians, what their costumes were, what the frontiersmen wore, and the makeup to make it authentic. One of the reasons the show looks so good is that Al Fleming was part of that team. Al is here right now. We can have a hand for Al.
Bruce has talked about all the serious stuff. I want to tell you a couple of funny things that happened. Burt said, well, I want you to go with the local coordinator out to the reservation and help me pick out some fierce-looking Indian warriors to play our warriors in the film, which I thought would be a great deal. So off we went to the Indian reservation with the local Indian coordinator there. And so I began eliminating people. I said, we need guys who are good writers. Everybody that's a good writer, raise your hand. Everybody raise their hand. I said, okay, now we need good writers that can ride bareback. Everybody raise their hand. I went, oh, this is going to be easy. So I started picking out individuals who had, good, strong Indian faces to be our fierce war party. So we picked I think there was about 25 or 30 Indians we picked out of the crowd. And they reported the next morning to the set, which Burt was ready for him. He was up on his thing with his loudspeaker looking at these fierce-looking Indians and said, now, you guys have got to be good bareback riders, because these Indians are going to come in. It's a very important scene in the film. Of course, everybody raised their hands again, so that was okay. So the next morning, we got ready to film the scene, and what the scene was Jim Arness and great character actor Jack Elam rode into this little canyon. This fierce war party surrounded them, rode down this little knoll and surrounded them and took them, captured Jack and Jim. Easy shot, right? Well, the morning of the shot, we got all the Indians looking fierce, war painted up in the right outfits, weapons, looked terrifying. I mean, it scared you just to look at these guys when they got on their horses. And the knoll they had rolled right down wasn't really even a knoll. It was just a slight slope in the ground, an easy ride. So they got all ready, got the lights set up, they rehearsed everything, got ready to shoot the shot. Burt calls, action. Jack and Jim slowly ride into the canyon. Indians! The Indians come charging down off the hill, hooping and hollering and screaming and just raising hell, a fierce-looking bunch of guys. By the time they got down to where Jim and Jack were, there's about 3 of them still on horseback. The rest of them were scattered out up along the hill, half of them rolling, laughing like crazy, and just flopping on the ground where they'd fallen off their horses.
So they could have been real actors then.
They could have been, yeah. This didn't work, so Burt said, well, let's try it again. Come on, you guys, we got to get this right. So they come down and they cued the Indians again. I think 6 of them were on their horses when they got to the bottom the second time. And Jack and Jim got to the point where it was so damn funny. We did about 7 takes, and it got to the point where when Burt would cue the Indians, Jack and Jim would already be they'd be laughing hysterically. They couldn't keep a straight face because they knew it wasn't going to work. So finally, after numerous takes and everybody getting very frustrated, of course, the crew was tickled with all this also. Bert said, okay, listen, you guys, just walk your horses down to him, and just walk up to him and take him prisoner and get him. And they finally got the shot. So it was a fun day. Anytime you work with Bert Kennedy, you knew we were going to have fun. It was going to be a nice, easy day work, and everyone was going to have a good time. He was just a great director and in person.